I feel chills looking out into this filled sanctuary of people who are here because our hearts are broken, because we want to say goodbye to our friend and our teacher. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Praise is the judge of truth. Adonai Natan V'Adonai Lakach. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. God gave us, He gave us a remarkable rabbi for 98 years. And God took him with Nishikat HaMalach, the kiss of an angel, and he left this world as peacefully as anyone can depart. And through it all, we praise God's name. We're going to have an opportunity to hear from so many people who were so close to Rabbi Stampfer, to open up the floodgates of our memory, to touch our hearts. I want to begin with a short selection from Eov from the book of Job. Tamid hacham imet mi mevi lanu temurato. Ki yesh lekesef motza u'makom lezahav yazoku. There's no replacing a person of wisdom. There are mines for silver and places where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth, and copper is smelted from the rock. But where can wisdom be found? And where is the source of understanding? There's no replacing a person of wisdom. Tamid hacham imet mi mevi lanu temurato. I'd like to call up at this time a dear friend of Rabbi Joshua Stampfer, Eileen Safyan, to lead us in the 23rd Psalm.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echzar, binot yabitzeni, al mei menucha yenachaleni. Nafshi Shovef, Nafshi Shovef, Yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begetz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha u'mishantecha hema yenachamuni taroch lefanai taroch lefanai השמן, דשנתיו השמן ראשי, דשנתיו השמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב החסד ידפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever.
Thank you, Rabbi Eve Posen. The heart of a Jewish levaya, a funeral, are words of praise. And boy, when it comes to Rabbi Stampfer, there's a lot to say. What a beautiful life. I'd like to have us begin by hearing some testimonies from two of his children, Shaul Stampfer and then Ilana Emlin.
I hope I'll make it to the end, but I've got equipment with me. On Hanukkah, the tradition is not to say a eulogy, but to limit one's words to divrei preda, or words of farewell. This is appropriate in the case of my father because it would be pointless and useless to try to summarize and assess the impact of his life. So, Dad, I will try to represent you and say for you thank you to some wonderful people, and then I will have to say goodbye. Several groups of people were close to my father in recent years. It goes without saying that the first who deserve thanks are a group of caregivers who, thanks to my sister Ilana and to my brother Meir, helped my mother and then my father for about a decade. When we say it goes without saying, what we really mean is it must be said. Today, the ranks of these caregivers included, in alphabetical order, Alma, Elizabeth, Maggie, Maria, and Valerie, and until very recently, Erica. In addition, I want to mention, without citing names, a very close and loyal circle of friends. You know who you are. You visited and invited my father over the years and continue to do so in his last years. The regular participants in my father's Talmud shiur were amazing. It wasn't the same class at the end that it was when my father began it. But for my father, the Talmud class was the highlight of the week, and the presence and the patience of the participants gave him the desire to prepare the class each week, and this maintained his self-esteem as the rabbi. The individuals who were close to my father and the synagogue staff are really too many to list. And of course, I have to thank on your behalf the Chevra Kadisha. Only my wife knows how much you owe her. Dad, I'm saying this for you, to everyone, to all of you, thank you. This has not been an easy period in our family, to say the least. Dad, when I was here just a bit more than a month ago for Matt's funeral, you went to Mom's grave and you said, "Goldie, I'll be with you soon." I tried to argue with you, gently, with the standard cliches of "we need you" and "there are so many things to look forward to," but you meant it. Your departure was totally anticipated and an absolute surprise. Now, as you wished, you are with her. Dad, you did not leave us a collection of profound texts to teach us and to inspire us. Dad, you taught us by doing, and you did so much. You saw Judaism as a rich civilization, and nothing Jewish was alien to you. History, political activism, intellectual activity, culture, family events, education, and above all, your synagogue, Neve Shmuel. You didn't talk about commitment, you were committed. I don't think you ever had a formal contract with the synagogue, but I know you turned down offers to relocate to more famous venues because this was your home. You taught us by never stopping to change and grow. When situations changed, your positions changed. You were anything but rigid. You knew the rules and they were important to you, but you could also make exceptions when it was necessary in order to obey a higher order of laws. Dad, I will miss you terribly. But I don't think your death will change anything, because you taught us, your children, your community, your students, to be independent and stand on our own 2 feet. You had a number of exceptional abilities. One was to identify needs and to think of ways to meet them. You saw the need for a preschool that would help teach the youngest children about their heritage, a need for a camp that would give older children the experience of a lifetime, for a day school, for a university framework open to all that would add the benefits of a critical study of Jewish history and culture, not to mention frameworks for adults such as public lectures, a film festival, then the museum, and more. Your other exceptional ability was not only to identify a need and to develop a solution, but also to find exceptionally talented people to take over these projects. To be honest, in almost every case, these people brought these projects to levels far beyond what you yourself did. And that was part of your achievement. You let these frameworks grow. While the temptations of power and honor could have led others in similar situations to try and stay in control, they didn't work on you. And the entire community is the better for this. You gave us, your children, the same freedom. None of us are in your template. You supported, you were interested. On occasions you had some comments, but you gave us not only life, but freedom. You knew in so many ways how to let go. Standing at your grave, I didn't. After all these years, I don't think that I can say that I really knew you. There's no way to count how many times you spoke, but there were things you didn't speak about so much. I know very little about your relations with your father, and nothing at all about your relations with your mother, who was killed in a tragic traffic accident when you were 16 years old and already studying at the University of Chicago. Your relations with your brother Judah were a mystery to me, and I can't even say that I know very much about your relations with Mom, though the intensity of your ties with her and your deep loneliness after she died were no secret. I do know that Noam's death broke the hearts of both of you, and you were never the same after Matt died. You grew up in poverty. I remember that you once told us that as a child on Hanukkah, you lit a Hanukkah menorah made out of hollowed out potatoes because you didn't have the money for a real Hanukkah menorah. I am certain that all of these colored your life and your relations with us. However, what was important for me was not your past, but what you did with it. And you gave me, my siblings, and so many others so much. All I can say is thank you, and I can never say it enough. Dad, I have to say something minor for the record and something not so minor. The minor part is that yesterday was your bar mitzvah Shabbat. That was because you were born on the third day of Hanukkah. I wanted to celebrate your birthday with you the next time I came. I did not realize that I would be celebrating, if that word can be used, with so many people a day after your bar mitzvah parsha. Usually we give gifts to the person who had a birthday. However, in your case, Dad, we are celebrating how much you gave us. Thank you. The other was more significant. The synagogue was so dear to you, and I was very touched by Rabbi Kosak's suggestion both to remember and to do. You were very close to his heart, like so many others of the community, and your visits meant a great deal to him. Dad, I know for you, the greatest honor was not in a plaque or something named in your honor, though you certainly appreciated that. What really meant something to you was people doing things that were meaningful and significant. Dad, you left the world a better place than you found it. Your life added content and strength to the general community and especially to the Jewish community. Our task, and it is not so simple, is to try to do the same, but in our own ways and in our own contexts. What you knew is that we cannot do this alone. This can only be done in a community. Dad, I will miss you so much. You were my measure and my model. You were my Abba. It would be worse if it was not so painful. You are now where I know you wanted to be. You told me. I didn't agree with you. It wasn't the first time I didn't disagree, but now I know it was the last time. Abba, we needed you a bit more. I think you know that, and it made you happy. At least I hope so. But your job is not finished. In the world of truth, we're relying on you to push. There are some things down here that need improvement. Abba, goodbye.
I would like to first of all thank Rabbi Posen and Rabbi Kosak for racing over to my dad's house on Thursday night and helping us through the first few hours after he died. You made such a big difference for us. We'll always be grateful. And I also want to thank the synagogue staff who have done so much to be a big part of our father's day-to-day life. I think he enjoyed national holidays much less than most people because the office was closed and he couldn't come and say hi. I also want to thank my parents, current and past caregivers, Maggie, Maria, Alma, Elizabeth, Erica, Cito, Vicky, and Annie. These skillful and kind women kept my mom and dad comfortable and safe and enabled them to live for so long at home next to the synagogue. We bought our house very close by in 2005, and since that time, my parents were my neighbors. The kind of neighbors that drop by for dinner, that you can borrow a cup of sugar from, that enjoy a casual day-to-day relationship. Nevertheless, no matter how often we popped in, my dad would greet me with a delighted, "Oh, Ilana, we are so going to miss our neighbor." My first memory of my dad is when we had just come home from spending the year in Jerusalem. I was almost 4 years old. Towards the end of that sabbatical year, we spent several days in a bomb shelter during the Six-Day War. After we got home, I was standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom making faces when some Air Force jets roared overhead, and I screamed, thinking that we were being bombed. Instantly, I ran to my parents' room, and my dad was already there, kneeling on the floor, arms outstretched, waiting to catch me and erase my fear. And I've thought of that moment often because of the comfort and the unconditional love. Both my parents maintained that steady comfort and love throughout their lives, and as much as we could, it's how Matt and I parented as well. Growing up, my dad had meetings most nights of the week, but when he was home at my bedtime, he would tell me a story. He didn't read me a story. He let me select from a menu of possible stories that he would whip up on demand. There were wise guy stories in which my dad was young and his friend Bob Sherrill, a detective, would call him up and ask for help solving a case. I could also request a Shmulek story about a young boy on a kibbutz who got into lots of mischief. Or I could get a Gina story. Gina was an 11-year-old girl who was clever and brave and did all kinds of creative things. I could request a flower lady story in which my dad would tell me about various things that happened when he worked in a flower shop in Akron, Ohio. Even though he was told not to, he would taste plants and all kinds of crazy things would happen. He would get really big or really small or hairy or bald, whatever. It was only yesterday that my daughters learned that Saba never actually worked in a flower shop. And then there were the Smokey the Bear stories, These were great because they came with an introduction song that I am going to gift you with whoever else in the immediate family who knows how it goes. I'm Smokey the bear, I'm walking on air, looking for fires all around. I'm Smokey the bear, I'm walking on air, keeping the forest safe and sound. My dad was a runner starting in the 1970s. He used to play tennis as many Shabbat afternoons as he could with Ted Schur and with Herb Ostroff. He also hiked as much as he could with Hirsch Tanzer and with Alan Sherman and many others. When I was old enough, I got to hike with him. We enjoyed the incredible scenery of Oregon and Southwest Washington, and we also really liked the steady forward movement towards a goal. Once we went on an up and back hike on Ruckles Ridge in the gorge. This is a lousy hike. It's up and up. There's no real view. People use it as a training hike for mountain climbing. We got lost and ended up on the highway when it was almost dark and several miles from where my dad had parked the car. So we flagged down a sheriff and explained what happened, and the sheriff said to my dad, "Oh, I heard about you two. Your wife has called the station several times to get us to look for you." The two of us joked about this for many years. It was a touchstone moment. Nothing was as bad as Ruckles Ridge. But of course there are things that are worse than a hike gone wrong. We lost my brother Noam. We lost my mom. We lost my husband Matt just 58 days ago. Dad was a great comfort to us. He exemplified a balance of grief and resilience that I can only aspire to. If I've learned one thing from him, it's to appreciate the past, but to always keep in mind what's coming up. What's the next event? The next delight? Optimism.
Rabbi Isaac.
A margin note on the first two blessings of the Amidah in our Shabbat morning Siddur tells us that Rav Soloveitchik observed that in the first blessing we see ourselves as heirs. God blessed our ancestors and will continue to bless us, for we inherit what they wrought. However, in the second blessing, our situation is radically altered. We experience our human vulnerability and our dependence upon God. Thus, simultaneously, we acknowledge our own sense of dignity and confidence, as well as the consciousness of our fragility and finitude. When I read that note yesterday morning, I thought that clearly connotes our mixed emotions today. We have come to praise and to give thanks for all that Joshua Stampfer provided for us, while simultaneously we feel vulnerable as we pay our respects. Yesterday's Gabbai Rich Meyer gave the 3 congregational aliyot to the Torah that were not assigned to the Bar Mitzvah, to Rabbi Kosak, Rabbi Posen, and to me. I'm sure he did that with intent. Our rabbi, who has been with this congregation and community for longer than anyone can remember, has gone to Olam Haba, the world to come. It is up to us to continue that legacy in the months and years ahead. 27 years ago, Congregation Neve Shalom waited anxiously for the arrival of its next rabbi. They hadn't engaged in the process for 40 years, and no one could remember how it had been done the last time. The synagogue board received strong advice and encouragement, I have been told, from the Rabbinical Assembly and the United Synagogue, The long-standing emeritus rabbi must leave the community. That's the only way for a successor to have a chance. Examples abound in which such transitions, where the rabbi remains in place, not just fail, but incur long-range disastrous fallout for the community. Rabbi Stampfer was not leaving, and the community waited. As that potential candidate, I too was intimately aware of situations in which retiring and incoming rabbis were so toxic that they couldn't even conduct civil conversations, and the congregation paid the ultimate penalty. So after being invited to come with my wife for an interview, I decided to give the beloved rabbi a call. It wasn't a long conversation, but after a few pleasantries, I asked him the only important question. I asked if he had any second thoughts about his impending transition into retirement. Nope, was his one-word response. A bit taken aback, when I got off the phone, I said, "Carol, I think we may have a serious problem." We never again talked about his retirement and my engagement by the congregation. No parameters, no issues of territory, though I did always sense his support. My first Shabbat, he sat next to me on the bima, and although I invited him to continue, he chose what became his and Goldie's seats over here in the pews. Were there those rare complications, uncomfortable situations, disappointments? I would be less than truthful if I denied that there were, but you, our dear congregants, never heard about them. But as we all know well, Rabbi Stampfer never ever really retired. He continued leading, advising, and fundraising for all of his projects: the Institute of Judaic Studies, Camp Solomon Schechter, the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Studies, the Oregon Film Festival, and his first love, teaching. When my retirement was imminent, his first conversation with me was, why don't we create emeriti classes together, which we did. We officiated at many events together, weddings and funerals of longtime members. At funerals, he was a master, remembering what someone said once in a class or what someone did while on a trip to Israel. He also had a way of occasionally throwing a zinger, but always with that special smile. He told me when a young man called him, pleading that there must be someone in the congregation who could give his father a ride to shul without missing a beat, he shot back, well, how about you? Not what the son was prepared to hear. Though of different generations, my own father was only 2 years older than Josh. We held much in common: our commitment to full egalitarianism, to opening doors and including gay and lesbian Jews, to nurturing relations with religious leaders of all faiths, to both an unconditional love for Israel and a strong concern and occasional criticism for its direction. In fact, I spoke to him recently about the fact that we had both attended a conference in Washington, D.C. that initiated his peace initiatives with Rodney Page and Franca Frangi, where for the first time at that conference, an Israeli general and politician and Palestinian leader, for the first time, sat together civilly and respectfully, sharing their views. I had been a congregational rabbi for 17 years prior to coming to Portland. But in those 17 years, I never had what Josh Stampfer became for me: a colleague confidant. There are stories that cannot be shared except in certain instances with my wife, but Rabbi Stampfer knew the whole cast of characters. I could share conversations with him and he with me, get his take on a particular situation, and more often than not, share a good, hearty laugh. Josh Stampfer shared a number of characteristics with my own father. He was humble and unpretentious. He lived his entire life with dignity and grace. Though I had my own father and Josh his devoted children, my honoring him was much as I honored my own father. So, Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God has given and God has taken away. Praise be the name of the Lord.
Thank you, Rabbi Isaac. I want to have us turn our lens on Rabbi Stampfer's life out into the broader community by calling up his beloved friend and colleague, Rodney Page. You're welcome.
Rabbi Stampfer and I have worked and prayed and served together for almost 40 years. And during that time, our friendship deepened, our affection, respect, and admiration for one another grew even deeper and stronger. We have worked for civil rights and human rights of all people, gay rights, Palestinian rights. Together we have marched and spoken out and witnessed for the poor and powerless. We have worked so that the three Abrahamic faiths might pray, serve, and work together for a more just and humane society. In the 60s, during the First Intifada, we took a group of Jews and Christians and Muslims to Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. The Israeli government was not pleased and tried to stop us. But because they never had a group like us before, a Christian minister, a rabbi, and a Muslim. But they didn't know that the name of Stampfer was golden. And it didn't hurt us that Rabbi's grandfather had been the chief rabbi in Jerusalem. They let us in. This was the first trip of the Oregon Interreligious Committee for Peace in the Middle East, which had been founded just a year before. Let me tell you the role that Josh played in that. I got a call from Ron Young, who had written a book, Missed Opportunities for Peace in the Middle East, and he said, "Rodney, I'm coming to Portland. I want you to put together a group of Jews, Muslims, and Christians." And I talked to, and I said, "I don't know any Muslims." "Well, find some and bring them together." So I did, and Josh was there, and Ron Young laid out his vision for a two-state solution, and for the time he had been living in Israel and in Jordan, and writing the book Missed Opportunities for Peace. And Josh said in the meeting, "Well, I don't believe in what you're advocating, but I'll be in Washington, D.C. when you are putting together the National Organization for Interreligious Peace in the Middle East." He came back from that and called me almost immediately. Said, "Rodney, call together the clergy of Portland, because I want to tell them I've changed my mind." I was confronted with a Palestinian woman who told me of her experience. I talked to Ron Young, I talked to Israeli, I talked to many people. I have changed my mind. And so I did, and he spoke to all the clergy of Portland, and there was Frank Afranji at that meeting. And afterwards, we got together and started the Oregon Interreligious Committee for Peace in the Middle East. And we took that group then to Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. And one of the places we visited was Hand in Hand, founded by Lee Gordon, an Oregonian, the son of Helen and Bill Gordon, who was the executive director of the Jewish Community Center. Lee went to Israel, and he and a Palestinian founded Hand in Hand. We visited 4 different grades in the school that now goes from kindergarten to 12th grade, and there are 5 different schools in Israel now of that. Each class is taught by an Israeli and Palestinian teacher. Each is taught in Hebrew and Arabic and are composed of both Israeli and Palestinian students. We were there just before Ramadan and Rosh Hashanah, and the children were learning about each other's religious traditions and learning each other's customs. A Jewish teacher told me she had never met a Palestinian before she started teaching it hand in hand, but she said, "I consider her my very best friend." Josh and I had many interesting experiences. I remember in Ramallah, where Josh and I got stoned together. Why are you laughing? I'm talking about being on a UN bus and children throwing stones at us. What did you mean? What do you mean? I remember Frank Afranji got up in a meeting of ecumenical ministries. Josh was sitting next to me, and Frank said, "I was so impressed by Rabbi's deep spirituality and Rodney Page's deep spirituality that I came home and became a devout Muslim." I said to Josh, "I know when I get to heaven, the Lord is going to ask me, how many people did you convert? I'm going to have to say 1 to the Muslim faith." At the start of the Gulf War, the first one, Josh and I were having lunch at the old Piccolo Mundo, and I asked, "Josh, how can we demonstrate in the face of this war that Jews, Christians, and Muslims can pray and work and serve together?" And we came up with the idea of Cavalcade for Peace. And this was just before Christmas, and so we were going to ask everybody at New Year's morning at 9 a.m., can you imagine that, coming here to this synagogue. And he said, "Rodney, you speak and have prayer, and we'll sing a hymn, and then we'll go down in a caravan and we'll ask Jews and Christians and Muslims to ride together in the same car, and we'll go down to the mosque on Southwest Huber, where I will speak at the mosque. And then we'll go down to First Christian Church, your church at Southwest Columbian Park, and the Imam will speak." Well, I said, "That's wonderful, John. Let's do it." He said, "You call the Imam and ask him you want me to call the Imam to ask if a Jew can speak from his pulpit?" Well, okay. So it took a little convincing, but we did it. And there, on that cold, foggy morning, hundreds of people were in this congregation. And we went in a caravan down to the mosque, and it was, being New Year's Day, a slow news day. Every single television and newspaper were here following us, and we went then to the mosque and then to First Christian Church. And I had everybody at the end of the service join hands in a big circle of the congregation and sing the hymn, "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me." And Stuart Gates, former ambassador to Morocco, vice president at Reed College, came up with tears streaming down his face. And he said, "Rodney, you know how to make an old man cry." What was it that motivated the two of us? What binds the two of us together to do these things that we did? It is, my friends, the values we share, our public commitments. The Hebrew scriptures say, "Without a vision, the people perish." And that vision is simply the content of the prophets, Jesus and the New Testament writers, and what they had to say about our common commitments, our common life, our social bonds we share in community with one another. And when we move toward that prophetic vision and democratic vision, Slavery is ended, civil rights achieved, freedom established, compassion implemented, justice advanced, human rights defended, and peace made. And when we neglect the vision, greed triumphs, narcissism raises its ugly head, selfishness erodes our common life, our divisions increase, our weapons expand, and our conflicts proliferate. Rabbi and I had lunch every month or so, sometimes with Frank Afranji and Jan Elfers, the Executive Director of Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. A few months ago, while taking him home after one of our luncheons, I asked, "Do you think we have accomplished anything in all these years of work together?" We both came to the same conclusion. Yes. There's new interfaith organizations. In fact, Ecumenical Ministries, along with Buddhists and Jews, Muslims, and Hindus and Native American religions, and all together have come together in a new organization. And they are putting together a giant map of the state of Oregon and identifying all the places where the religious communities are working together to serve the poor and the powerless and the sick and the addicted and all whose way is hard. And we will have a complete map of the religious communities showing what we're working and doing together. Well, my friends, we live in very difficult times. Richard Spencer, one of the creators of the alt-right, has invited all alt-right people, Ku Klux Klan, white nationalists, to move to Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana to create the alt-right nation that will eventually secede from the United States. We need to work together to celebrate and reinforce the values we hold together as Jews and Christians and Muslims, the values that St. Paul so beautifully speaks about. But the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Do not be deceived. God's not mocked. Whatever a person sows, that shall they reap. I conclude with a little paragraph that Rabbi Stampfer, Rabbi Rose, and I put together when we formed the organization, the Oregon Interfaith Alliance. And these were our remarks that we made together at that press conference 30 years ago. We pledged to resist the politics of division. More specifically, we pledged to help restore civility and common sense to the public debate, to educate voters, and to stress the unifying principles of our various faiths: peace, justice, and mutual respect. We also pledged to promote the positive role of religion as a healing, constructive force in public life, and to challenge those who manipulate religion for partisan political gain. Rabbi Stampfer, you have so enriched so many lives. You stood for justice and peace while you showed us how much more we should do together than we can separately. Blessings on you, Rabbi, and blessings to each of you here who are celebrating the life of our mentor, Rabbi Joshua Stampfer. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you, Rodney Page. I just want to mark and thank my colleagues, but more specifically, Rabbi Stampfer's colleagues, so many members of the Oregon Board of Rabbis and our Oregon rabbis are here today. Those who had other obligations, which you can imagine plays rather easily for rabbis on Sunday, sent their regards and regrets that they couldn't be here with us. But thank you for honoring our leader, for being here, for carrying us in our pain and our loss. We don't take it for granted, and it really means the world to us. So thank you for being here and supporting us at this difficult time. I want to call up everybody with Rabbi Stampfer was a best friend, right? That was his special gift. If you're here, you probably thought you were his best friend, and you were. I want to call up two of his many best friends. I want to call up Vic and Tanette Menashe to share some comments. I guess, Vic, the duty's fallen on you.
Thank you. Tanette and I are most honored to have been called upon to share our thanks and heartfelt gratitude for the friendship of Rabbi Stampfer. For the past 66 years with Rabbi Stampfer, this has been one of our greatest blessings. Rabbi Stampfer had affected us individually and as a couple. We are among the few congregants who have known the rabbi since he arrived in Portland in 1953 to become the rabbi of Congregation Ahave Sholom. Tanette's father, Lou Rosenberg, was among the Stampfer's first greeters on their arrival at Union Station with Goldie, Shaul, Meir, and Noam. Nahama and Ilana came later. The Stampfer's first house had been the home of Tanette's grandparents on 5th and College, which is now a fire station. Rabbi Stampfer officiated at all of our family's life cycle events: the deaths of our parents, the brises of our boys, their bar mitzvahs, and their weddings. I should add that since we would have been in Denmark for the year before Jeff's bar mitzvah, the rabbi made a tape of his Haftarah. And since they were going to spend their sabbatical year in Israel that year, they made a stop in Copenhagen to give Jeff a personal lesson. The rabbi, as you know, loved to teach. And though it seems like yesterday that Tanette worked with the rabbi as religious school teacher and for over 10 years as principal of the religious school, it's been past, and that was in 1977 that she was last here. But rather than talk about Rabbi Stampfer as our rabbi, we would like to tell you about something of our friend Josh. Friends are those persons that you enjoy to be with, and we certainly always enjoyed being with Josh. Friends are those that you laugh with, and with whom at sometimes you can be silly. We laughed a lot with Josh, and at times we were silly. But mostly we discussed and debated over dinners, topical issues, always Israel, occasionally religion. Josh was tolerant of us, as he is tolerant of all of us. One of his most best characteristics that I can think of. And usually turned these discussions that we had into a teaching session, of course. and we were always happy to sit and learn from him. His wealth of knowledge and where some of the things that he came up with from way back when he had learned it in whenever was amazing. And we certainly were happy to sit there and listen. Friends also confide with one another and sometimes even gossip. And we did that with Josh. Just last Wednesday, we were so fortunate to have that time with him. We spent an hour with Josh doing all sorts of things, discussing Bible, talking about movies, how he was preparing for his next class to teach on Jerusalem, a class that was scheduled and had already 110 individuals ready to go and more waiting, I'm sure. It seems that anybody who had ever sat in a class with Josh was ready to go again and again and again. Whenever he had a class, they were signing up for it in a hurry. And interspersed with his memories of his making up a class roster, etc., we talked about the memories of our many trips that we made together. New Zealand, South Africa, Portugal, lost Jews, wherever they were. He was always looking for that. And of course, we were in Israel with him. He loved movies. He was always ready to go to a movie, always asking us, when are we going to the next movie? And when we were talking about it, he asked, what movies had we seen recently? A Marriage Story, Knives Out, and of course we saw The Two Popes, which he could see on Netflix and had recommended that this would be the movie that he should see. A great dialogue, something that he would enjoy and really take part in. And the last hour we spent with Josh evinced great enthusiasm from him. Lots of laughter, and some of that came from gossip. Somebody here may know. And even with all of this, with all the memories we went through, Josh was always looking forward. What's coming up next? What can we plan for next? And I leave you with this, that what he would want us to do now is to do what we can to make our lives better and the community better. And that's my message. I thank you for the opportunity. I know that he would want us all just to go on and live. Thank you.
It's nothing better than old friends. Thank you, Vic. You honored him. In his incredibly varied life and his connections to Israel, Rabbi Stampfer lived at one point in French Hill, and one of his favorite songs was Me'al Pisgat Har Hatzofim, which speaks of that hill. And the family requested that song accompany him out of this world. I'd like to call on Cantor Bitone to sing for us Me'al Pisgat Har Hatzofim.
Me'al Pisgat Har הצופים, אשתחווה לך אפיים, מעל פסגת הר הצופים, שלום לך ירושלים, מהדורות חלמתי עלייך, לזכות לראות באור פנייך. ירושלים, ירושלים, האירי פנייך לבנך. ירושלים, ירושלים, מחורבותייך אבנך. מעל פסגת הר הצופים, שלום לך ירושלים. אלפי גולים מקצות כל תבל, נושאים אלייך עיניים. אלפי ברכות, היי ברוכה, מקדש מלך, עיר מלוכה. ירושלים, ירושלים, אני לא אזוז מפה. ירושלים, ירושלים, יבוא המשיח, יבוא, יבוא המשיח, יבוא.
Your cantor be tone. On Friday night, at the end of the Shabbat meal, there is a special prayer contained in Birkat Hamazon, in the series of blessings we make, thanking God for the food and the sustenance. And one in particular is said on behalf of the hosts of the home. Rabbi Stampfer came up with his own tradition of mentioning every one of his grandchildren, now numbering 20, and then his great-grandchildren, numbering a mere 16. So I think we better hear from the grandchildren as well. And we're going to get to hear from Abby, Aviva, and then Orly.
Our Saba was a hard man to keep up with. Long before I could grasp this on any kind of metaphorical level, I knew it quite literally. As kids, we actually had to run after him a lot. Whether walking down the hill to synagogue or summiting a peak on a Sunday hike, Saba always strode with speed and determination, and I had to adopt a running skip walk in an attempt to keep pace. In time, I came to understand a little bit about why this was. our Saba wasn't like most people. He possessed a kind of superhuman energy and will and ability to make things happen in the world. And an important sidebar, he also had Bubby, without whom nothing would have been possible. So he had superhuman energy and he had Bubby. I'm not going to try to list his accomplishments to you, his own beloved community, because you probably know them better than I do. But what I can do is share a glimpse into that feeling of growing up running in his awesome wake, wondering if you'll ever be able to catch up. And by catch up, I think you also know that I mean to live up to such a great man. It's really not easy. About 10 years ago, after one of Saba's many near-death experiences, something interesting happened. He began to slow down a little bit. I mean, just to a regular human pace. And as we all know, he never really retired. But a remarkable new stage of his life seemed to have initiated. He began to truly sit back and enjoy all that he had done. Another person in his situation might have done so with arrogance or smugness or self-importance, but not our Saba. Ever a role model, he now welcomed old age with gratitude and humility, resilience and pleasantness. He became easygoing. He treated his wonderful caregivers with respect and good cheer. And as for us grandchildren, he managed to meet every one of us wherever they were, conveying to each of us that we were more than good enough, but thoroughly loved and a source of endless pride. What a blessing. I wish everyone could be lucky enough to receive a gift like that. Reviewing his life, I think about the Passover song that we sing at the Seder, Dayenu. With each institution founded, award received, book published, trip taken, his legacy truly would have been enough, Dayenu. But he always managed to go beyond in new and unexpected ways. Now, on top of everything else, he also managed to show us how to age with wisdom and grace, to step back and let each day come to you as a blessing. One of the most famous teachings from the ethics of the fathers is Ezehu Asher Hasameach Bechoko. Who is the rich man? The one who rejoices in his lot. Saba's portion was enormous, but so was his appreciation for it. Everyone here is a part of it, and he delighted in each of us. In the last email I received from Saba a little over a week ago, he told me, quote, "I hope we will all have a very joyous Hanukkah." I'll be honest, his word choice stunned me. How could Hanukkah be joyous for our family this year, racked as we are with grief and loss? One last time, just by sitting there in his acceptance and his gratitude, Saba had somehow gotten a step ahead again. It's amazing. And it really inspires you to keep running to catch up.
Hello. My name is Aviva. I'm one of the grandchildren, number 12. Daughter of Carol and Noam and sibling of Rachel and Zeph. And I'd like to share some memories with you today, but I'm going to start with some Talmud. So here goes. 2 years ago, my Saba and Rabbi Joey were studying a text from Talmud, Moed Katan 21b. And my Saba remarked that this is what he would want shared about him at his funeral. Coincidentally, I was also planning on sharing this exact passage, so it works out. That was a joke. If you were wondering. Here's the passage. The mourners gathered to console Rabbi Akiva on the death of his sons. When they were about to leave, Rabbi Akiva stood on a large bench and said, "O brothers, the house of Israel, listen. Even had my 2 sons been bridegrooms, I would have been consoled on account of the honor you have shown them. If you came to console for the sake of Akiva, there are many Akivas in the marketplace who the Jews do not all come to console. Rather, certainly, this is what you have said to yourselves. The Torah of his God is in his heart," from Psalms 37:31. "And you wish to show respect for the Torah. All the more so, your reward is doubled, for you have shown respect for the Torah. Return now to your homes in peace." Now, what does that mean? My mom and my siblings and I tried to figure this out with some interpretive help from Rabbi Joey and the family. So why did Saba want this to be said about him at his funeral? The story suggests that the magnitude of mourning for a leader is not just about their accomplishments. It is perhaps about our own longing for Jewish connection and the way that he shared love for Torah in his life. Rabbi Akiva deflects the worry and sadness of others. Torah, when alive in your heart, is in all the wonderful kindness we show each other. My Saba invested in Jewish life. He was hopeful about the future and affirming in the present. He invested in his family and in the broader community. And looking out at this very large crowd today is a testament to his investment in all of us, that so many people are here to honor his legacy. Building community was his life's mission, and I think the strength of that community was what comforted him in the loss of his 2 sons. I also think that's part of why he wanted this passage shared today. So, when I got married to Blake, my Saba sat in the front row, there to witness our union and share in our joy. At the reception, we asked if he wanted to speak. He got up and said, "Wow, you're wealthy." Wealthy in community. He also did that pause to get the laughs, because he loved the laughs. And then he went on to talk about how impressed he was to see our friends and family supporting and celebrating us, and how this community that we built would continue to help us build our lives together. This meant so much to me because of how much he valued community. Everywhere he went, he built bridges. You've heard so much about that already today. He maintained friendships. He wove a deep, intertwined network. He built relationships that lasted and followed up. He was cheering on Zev's political career, remembering Jim's research projects, comparing mountain climbing notes with Rachel, and connecting Blake with local musicians. Community is a value my Ava and Mama shared too. So when I think about the community I built and the community that supported us at our wedding, it's as a generational value that's been passed down and is clearly seen here today as well. The last time I sat down with my Saba, just the 2 of us, was during a visit to see my Uncle Matt when he was recovering from surgery. We had a nice visit at the kitchen table, and at the end he held my hand and said, "Aviva, be happy." I smiled and said I'd try. It felt like a message that was important to him to impart to me. Looking back on that now, I think he was trying to tell me the importance of embracing joy in challenging moments. My Saba found joy in life and helped bring it to others, and I plan to honor him by doing the same.
Hi, everyone. I'm Orly. I'm Mary and Claire's daughter. My siblings, Sam and Elion, and I grew up outside of Boston. From a young age, my Saba seemed larger than life. I had the sense that many people outside of our family in this amazing community looked to him for guidance and cared about him just like we did. To me, he was a legend. When we were little, we used to gather around him while he told us Smokey the Bear stories. Every story would start the same way. Smokey would wake up and take a big stretch, and then have a bowl of nuts and honey and berries for breakfast. And Saba would always sing that song for us that we sang a few moments ago. Whenever I got back home from trips to Portland, I would proudly tell my friends, and I really believed this, that my Saba invented Smokey the Bear. And I'm told that I'm not the only grandchild who believed this. As I grew older, and especially when my wife, Verb, and I moved to Portland, I really got to know Saba better as a person, not a larger-than-life being. It was a combination of me growing up and him also becoming more relaxed and open. One time, Verb and I asked Saba what his favorite hike was around here. He said without much hesitation, Hamilton Mountain. I had hiked Hamilton Mountain. It's a really nice hike, but I was surprised he would choose that one out of all of the hikes through the splendor of the gorge or the mountains. Saba was an avid hiker and climber. He told me once that being out in nature was a spiritual experience for him, and he remarked to my dad that he wished he had climbed more mountains. So I asked him, why? What do you like so much about Hamilton Mountain? He said, oh, there's a really nice bathroom at the trailhead. So there you have it. Rabbi Stampfer appreciated a good trailhead bathroom, just like the rest of us. I was continually humbled by Saba's compassion and support. This ranged from little things, like when Verb and I were planning to recite alternative blessings at our wedding to make the translations more meaningful to us as we read them under the chuppah. I read these alternative blessings to Saba and I asked him what he thought. He said, I like it. I was surprised. I said, Saba, I thought you might be disappointed that we're changing the words to these age-old, really central, important blessings. He said, no, I like that you're doing things your own way. And he laughed. There were also big, life-changing things, like when I came out to Saba. I had been nervous about it for many reasons, including that I knew he had refused to perform a gay marriage. I was scared. I asked Ilana to come with me, sit next to me, and I cried. And after I told him, he was quiet for just a short moment. And then he said, oh, but why are you crying? And I said, I'm crying because I'm nervous, because I didn't know what you would think. And he said, darling, you have nothing to be nervous about. And then, after a few more moments, he said, many years ago, a gay couple asked me to perform their marriage, and I refused. And he told me the story of why he refused, what was going through his mind. And then he said, and that's one of my greatest regrets. That really blew me away. Saba was over 90 when I came out to him. What an incredible lesson he shared in that moment about human capacity for change, growth, and compassion. Rabbi and Saba had 20 grandchildren. We cover a wide spectrum of family life choices, career decisions, relationships with Judaism, and how we practice. And Bubby and Saba loved each and every one of us so much. as we've referenced a few times already, when Saba recited the Birkat Hamazon, he would say the names of his children and grandchildren, a long list. And as spouses and great-grandchildren were added, the list got even longer and more complicated. But it always maintained a certain melody and cadence that was familiar and comforting. Saba said that when he recited the names of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, he would take that moment that he says the name, to hold an image of that person in his mind. He would take that moment to think of that person and how much he loves them. To be held in his mind, to be thought of and appreciated every single time he said Birkat Hamazon. That's powerful. We were all so greatly blessed by Saba's love. Thank you.
Thank you to all his grandkids. Wow. Amazingly, Rabbi Stampfer did not orchestrate his entire funeral, but he did ask for a few different elements to be included, and one of which was the next part of our observance, and I want to call Alana Emlin back to the bima to talk about that.
Several years ago, I popped over to see my dad, my neighbor, our rabbi, during the break in Yom Kippur services, and he said, "Ilana, there's something I want to have happen at my funeral." And I was horrified, and I said, "Well, Dad, that's a long ways off." And he said, "No, I just want to, say it now. I want to have Eileen Safian chant the priestly benediction just like she does at the Yom Kippur service and have it be a farewell from me to the congregation." And I said, okay, I would. And I called Eileen and I said, "Oh, I have this big request, but it's not going to happen for a long time." And she tucked it away in her mind. And this blessing is chanted during Yom Kippur services, but it's also essentially the blessing that my father gave to each of us on Friday nights and that we give to our children, and also the blessing that he gave to all of the bar and bat mitzvahs, where he would put his hands on your head. And since so many of you are here, I'm just curious, raise your hand if you've had Rabbi Stampfer bless your kepi. That's really a lot of people. So when Eileen chants this for you, what he wanted was for you to hear her beautiful voice, but to know that with it is coming his love and his wishes for your well-being, each and every one of you. So listen but feel.
I had it under control until. Okay, all right. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. Yevarechecha Adonai
I've had the gift since I've come to Neve Shalom to lead services with Eileen on the high holidays, and to have the gift of having Rabbi Stampfer sit in our service and watch him in this moment. And this is his blessing to us. May God bless us and protect us. May God be gracious to us and smile upon us. May God lift us up in kindness and show us peace. Amen.
Amen.
Perhaps a moment of levity is in order. My grandfather, as he was practicing his retirement speech from his congregation, was doing it in the living room, and my grandmother tussed him and said, "Enough already, it's too much, you'll bore them." And he said, "I've worked for them for 50 years, they can sit a little bit longer." There's certain people whose lives do not belong to them, nor their families, nor even their communities. Even though they are deeply loved and treasured by their families and communities, and even though such souls almost always love their families and communities, with a special depth that exceeds the love they receive. These special souls belong to humanity and to time itself. We don't really know what accounts for such human greatness. Herman Melville once wrote, "Be sure of this, O young ambition, all mortal greatness is but disease." It's true. Many people who strive and achieve great things do so to fill the gaps in their own souls. Perhaps the majority, but not all. Certain individuals seem placed in their time for purposes that defy easy explanation. Some of these are like a wildflower that forces its way through the cracked black top of an inner city park. Their presence seems miraculous, even impossible. Others are more like orchids or bonsai. They're the products of generations of a carefully tended lineage in which love, education, vision, and concern for others forms part of a genetic, epigenetic, and cultural legacy passed down by a family over many centuries. Even in these carefully tended family plots, not every human flower achieves greatness, although there's a better chance that its members will be very decent humans who participate and contribute to society as a whole. This keeps the familial plot of land rich and fertile, so that every so often the soil of such families puts forth an exceptional bloom. Rabbi Joshua Stampfer was such a one, born into and of a remarkable family. Here was a great man who lived without the diseases that normally afflict mortal greatness, such as arrogance, love of wealth or power. His appetites for attention and moral stroking were minimal. His love of humanity, all circles of humanity, and not just his own people, was immense. His energy on behalf of others was unflappable, carrying him into his late 90s with a productivity that many in their 40s might envy. Because Rabbi Stampfer was such a rare bloom, our grief is deeply complicated. We mourn for the man who was our father, grandfather, cherished family member. We mourn for the loss of our friend, our rabbi, our confidant, our communal leader. We also mourn for the end of an era now that our great rabbi is gone. We mourn as well, for in the long shadow cast by this closing of an era, it is impossible not to question the way forward. When Moses died, the Israelites had the blessings of Joshua to lead them. But for us, it was Joshua who was taken from us. I've avoided speaking personally so far because I don't want my own overwhelming sense of loss and powerful emotions to interfere with the honor due to one of my teachers and mentors. Yet his sure hand provided me with important guidance, and I also feel bereft. Since our collective grief is so complicated, we have several tasks to accomplish here. We need to understand where this rare soul came from. We need to recall his outsized achievements, some of which have been outlined. And while we all share this loss, and while everyone in this sanctuary is suffering, we also need to provide comfort for Rabbi Stampfer's family. Let me add that their grief is personal. For them, Rabbi Stampfer's larger-than-life status is second to the intimacy and love that family members share with one another. So we must support you, even while allowing you the privacy you need. Our needs have to come second to yours. For 67 years, Rabbi Stampfer cared for us and addressed our needs. Let us do the same for this magnificent family. Finally, we have one other task. By gleaning his values, we must allow ourselves a moment to understand that he did not leave us without a way forward. We must also imagine that for ourselves. Bereshit bara, the story of origins. Look unto the rock whence you were hewn, and the pit where you were digged. Look unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah that bore you. This verse from Isaiah is one that Rabbi Stampfer himself quoted to understand the forces that shaped him. Born December 28, 1921 in Jerusalem, Palestine, under the British Mandate, he was the son of Rabbi Elijah David Stampfer and Nechama Frank. His great-grandfather for whom he was named was Joshua Stampfer, the founder of Petach Tikva, the first new Jewish community in Palestine. To put this into perspective, David Ben-Gurion in 1960 was speaking to a bunch of rabbinical students in Israel, and it just so happened that our Joshua Stampfer was there, unbeknownst to David Ben-Gurion, who said, "Do you know who was the founder of the Zionist movement? Do you think it was Theodor Herzl? No, it was Yehoshua Stampfer." His mother Nechama, meanwhile, was the daughter of Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank, the chief rabbi of Jerusalem. His sandak for the Brit Milah was Rav Kook, the chief rabbi of Palestine. This is what we call yichus, the Yiddish word for how our family lineage shapes us and sometimes imposes upon us a greater duty to match this privilege of heritage which we were given. At age 2, Rabbi Stampfer and his family took the train to Alexandria, Egypt, and got a boat to America, where his father worked around the country. And Rabbi Stampfer, seeing the difficult work of a rabbi, and as he shared with us just last week at the Shabbat before his bar mitzvah, he got his degree in chemistry and then went on to get a master's degree creating synthetic rubber for the war effort. But boy, did he hate the work. He told me once, after, 6 months in the lab with the most boring lab mate, he said, "That's it. I'm going to become a rabbi." In 1943, he went to Brandeis camp as one of the very few men. And being a clever person, he found the best pick there. It's where he met Goldie. They married a year later. And theirs was one of the great love stories of two people working side by side with a common vision. And as an aside, when this community laid Goldie to rest, Rabbi Stampfer spoke from this very bima. He actually spoke a lot shorter than he normally did. But at this time, I felt it was because even the great orator himself was unable to do justice to Goldie with words. Her legacy and her impact were equally immeasurable. Realizing his calling to human relations and rabbinics, but with a broader perspective, he left the Orthodox upbringing which he had and enrolled at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And as part of his studies there for the year of study in Jerusalem, he arrived in 47, just as the War of Independence was intensifying. So what did a student do who should be focused on learning? He joined the Haganah, the Jewish Defense Force. He was there, they were there when plans for the state of Israel were announced, but because of some medical concerns and the state of medicine in Israel, they returned to the U.S., where Shaul was born in 1948. He graduated from seminary in 49, took his first rabbinical position in Lincoln, Nebraska, where Meir and Noam joined the family. And then he was recruited to Ave Shalom and interviewed by Louis Rosenberg, and the father of Tanet Menashe and Renee Holzman and the family. And by 1953, they moved to Portland. He was met at the train by Ike Davis, president of the congregation, Phil Weinstein, Hi Sulco. 2 days after he arrived, not a lot of time for a new rabbi, he officiated at the wedding of Sam Schaefer and Beulah Menashe. And the following Sunday, just in case he was a little tired from the move, he married 4 couples, each in a different venue. I don't think you gave him much of a break in the intervening years. Live note, ulahiva note, to build and to be built. I think what we build reflects our concerns and our values, and it also changes us, shaping us as much as we shape it. Nowhere could this be more true than in the example of Rabbi Stampfer. His institutional building and community activities still boggles the mind. Camp Solomon Schechter in 1956. By the way, the first 3 resort sessions took place in a broken-down motel. Most people have forgotten that and remember instead Camp Casey on Whidbey Island before it moved to its present location in Tumwater. He founded the USY chapter Rishonim, first in the Northwest, and then a Leaders Training Fellowship for teens. We heard from Shaul how he founded Foundation School, which is, what a great school with a legacy that is. Brotherhood morphed into Men's Club, Women's Institute, on and on. As a community leader, he was sought out by our Oregonian political leaders, provided the invocation for the governor's installation in 1957, and those relationships grew over the years. He founded, after a half-year sabbatical in Israel, he founded the Hillel Academy, now our Portland Jewish Academy. He served on government committees, including transportation under the Eisenhower administration, the State Juvenile Code with Governor McCall, the State Ethics Board, facilitated the merger here of Ahavei Shalom with Neve Tzedek to form our Neve Shalom. He advanced religious equality for women, including bat mitzvah and aliyot and minyan inclusion. He spearheaded an able committee, thank you, Elaine Kogan, who created a non-gendered Shabbat evening prayer book when none was available on the marketplace. He was active in civil rights, social justice, world peace, including, as we heard, a controversial stand for the 2-state solution when that was considered beyond the pale. In 1961, he took the post of Hillel counselor at PSU and thus began his relationship there, which led eventually to the founding of the Jewish Studies Department there and the Middle East Study Center. He worked with Muslim and Arab faculty despite criticism that he received from some within the Jewish community. You know, some people just end up in this moment in history, in this tide of the river, because he had another sabbatical, and it just so happened to occur in 1966 to 67. And they spent it in Israel, staying in a bomb shelter during the shelling of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War. He arrived one of the first at the Western Wall just hours after it was returned to Jewish control after 2,000 years. His next sabbatical, his timing may not have been the best, took place in 1973, and it was delayed by the Yom Kippur War. He was one of those who helped develop the conservative movement present in Israel, setting up several educational programs, on and on and on. In 74, with Shirley Tanzer, he started the Oregon Jewish Historical Society, and that grew into the Oregon Jewish Museum. We heard about his work with our Jewish Film Festival. In 1976, following in the footsteps of Vic and Menashe, he and Goldie smuggled forbidden Jewish educational materials to Soviet refuseniks. And Adam Schechter told me about his grandmother, and you made mention of it as well, Shul. You have to imagine this guy, very informal, in a long trench coat with pockets in the middle of summer so he could smuggle in what? Tefillin and talitot. You thought Chabad did this? Not only. 1980, he co-founded Generations for Peace. He helped to create our Peace Plaza here in Portland. I could go on, and I feel we might only scratch the surface of what this man did. 1983, with Sylvia Frankel, co-founding the Oregon Holocaust Research Center, now merged with the Oregon Jewish Museum, and then the Institute for Jewish Studies. He went to China to visit crypto-Jews. His energy was unflagging, his creativity beyond normal bounds, which makes it sting all the more, doesn't it? Looking past the loss. Kol koreh b'midbar, panu derech Adonai, yashru ba'araba, misila le'Eloheinu. Hark, a voice calls, clear a way in the wilderness for God, straighten a path in the desert for our God. Isaiah. We're a long way from Tisha B'Av in the summer, but it marks the saddest day in the Jewish calendar, commemorating the destruction of the first and second temples, as well as other calamities. And each one of those unnerved our peoples. On the Shabbat after Tisha B'Av, we recite that verse, that section from Isaiah, and the day is called Shabbat Nachamu because it begins, Nachamu, Nachamu, take comfort, says God. Isaiah looks around at what can only be seen as loss and destruction, yet in that place of pain and death, the prophet still perceives God's hand. He imagines that in a place where there's no clear and easy way forward, a road will be paved and the way straightened for us. And then Isaiah concludes, but they that wait for God shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. We have to mourn. We are mourning. There is no choice, for our loss is great. Yet we also know that Rabbi Stampfer was a man of unflagging optimism. He had this mind-boggling capacity to look forward towards a future when most people his age, those who make it to his age, are focused on the past, harvesting their memories. He would understand our need to mourn and would encourage us to do so. But I also fully believe that having done so, he would want us to rise up and shake the dust from our sackcloth. The greatest testament we can offer, the greatest honor we can pay, is to continue and expand on his values. Rabbi Stampfer's great legacy was to create an infrastructure for community, Jewish living, and human dignity. An infrastructure. Our job is to continue to fill it with Jewish living, to fill it with the intangibles of spirit and heart, to expand the Jewish circle to best embrace all those who want a place within our tent, to recognize that while his legacy institutions will continue to provide a firm foundation for future Jewish and communal living, we must still do what he did and look for the gaps, the places where things are missing. In our era, an era experimenting with new forms of virtual community and even living without any real community at all, we will need to strengthen ourselves with the examples of his courage and his creativity, even as we seek new avenues and new answers. A number of years back, Shaul, I recall a conversation we had. I had raised the question, have we moved into an age without Gedolim, without giants of Torah? Are we in a period where what we need is fewer individuals of remarkable talent and giftedness? Is an age of teams whose success is measured across the system and not only by looking at one towering figure? Or rather, do certain times simply produce the conditions and needs into which a handful of gifted people could rise to greatness? I don't have the answers to those questions. What I can say, because I knew Rabbi Stampfer, is that not all mortal greatness is disease. Occasionally, the Holy One of Blessing provides us with an Ish Tamim, a pure one, whose love for us is unquenchable. And because we have known him, that is enough to go on, to do great things, to make the world a little better in his memory, in his honor. Shalom, Chaver. Goodbye, my friend. Goodbye, our friend. אני כבר מתגעגע בך. שלום ולהתראות. We have just a few more moments of rituals to observe, so I want to add just announcements that at the conclusion of the service, everyone is invited to the Suda Havra'ah, the meal of consolation downstairs in Bernbach Hall. And I hope you'll come and have the opportunity to share with one another your memories and the impact that Rabbi Stampfer had on you. At this time, I'll ask that we all rise as Eileen Safyan leads us in the Al Maleh Rachamim.
El Maleh Rachamim shochen b'meromim hametzeh menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina b'ma'alot kedoshim utehorim כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת הרב יהושע בן הרב אליהו דוד ונחמה שלח לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. Ana bal harachamim, hastireu b'setek knafecha leolamim, utzro b'tzra hachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen.
We remain standing for the words of the mourner's Kaddish. We join together in a community having done the rites of mourning and of burial, welcoming into this space, the space where we all feel the deep loss that we've felt, and the space of community in this time. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi, Be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayachon u'vyomachon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam me'omea amaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithazar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudasha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata d'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min Shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen.
Tekiah. Shvarim. Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah Gedolah.